Rooted in faith, rooted in family, rooted in values, rooted in traditions. Welcome to the Rooted Outdoors podcast. Welcome to the Rooted Outdoors podcast. I'm your co-host, Corey Bauman. I'm with my buddy Dave over there, and this guy down low, which you'll get to meet here in a second. But first, give some updates, Dave. What's going on in the Rooted world? What's going on in your world? It's been a couple weeks since we've been on here.
It has. Man, I can't believe it, but we are preparing for deer season. Like what just happened?
Are we talking whitetails?
We're talking whitetails. I can't even believe it. I was out, I guess it was last weekend, actually with our guest who was helping me out and hanging some sets. We'll get into that later, but hanging some sets, getting prepared for next season. It's busy with work. It's always busy trying to do some things around the house. Had to get my house ready for Corey to come and visit. Just playing host, playing
You
host.
are the best. I'm not lying. I'm the best host. I wish we had time to play that 17-minute message I left you about how great you are of a host. I mean,
that was nice.
It was unbelievable. Yeah, man. So I've been busy too, traveling around Pennsylvania, back to Texas, back to Pennsylvania, coming back in July. Business, all kinds of cool stuff. Kids are out of school. Well, we have one child, but she's out of school now. So summer's kicking in full force in Texas. It's already been 100 degrees twice. I know. It's crazy, dude.
That's crazy.
But I won't share a ton because I don't have a ton going on. But it is I do have a pretty cool thing, Dave, you already know about. That's happened to me and kind of has changed my Texas whitetail season in a big way. If you know, last year did just trying to learn a new area, just learning Texas and public land, having no lease or anything like that, just kind of going out and figuring it out. Well, there's this place called the Hagerman National. It's a national refuge basically for wildlife, and they don't hunt. You're not really allowed to hunt it. They do 3 draw hunts every year, and they're back-to-back weekends. So they're the first 3 weekends in November. They do a waterfowl draw hunt. They do a turkey hunt. But like, other than that, dude, it's shut down. And I don't know how many acres total, but it's a big area. And they have probably 6 management units that they basically rotate. So they, there's thousands of people that apply to this every year. And they use preference points like they would in like Iowa or somewhere like that in the Midwest. And so, it's hard to draw. And I've only been a resident now for not even 2 years yet. And so I put in for this draw and I get drawn for this hunt beginning in November. It's a 3-day hunt. It's going to be so you can hang your sets the Thursday before the season. So you go in, you hang your sets. It's a really regulated hunt, but it actually sounds pretty cool. And then you hunt Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So in Texas, you can hunt Sunday. So you hunt 3 days. I've already done my research about the place. It's an unbelievable place. And a lot of times the misconception is that Texas is known for their southern Texas whitetails is kind of like the place to hunt whitetails. But what I've learned and what a lot of people don't know is there's some huge deer shot even in North Texas. And they've shot a couple years ago, I believe they shot a deer that they aged and they think he's like 9 or 10. I mean, huge, not just huge deer, but there's been 200-inch deer shot out of this place. And of course that's, whatever, but it's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. So I'm pretty pumped about it. I can go in and scout this summer. You can't hang trail cameras or anything like that. So it's different. It's a different way to hunt. But there's big deer in there. And I was only one of like 44 people that had no preference point that got drawn out of 244 or something like that. So yeah, so now I'm in and the cool thing is if you go in and you shoot a doe any one of those 3 days, you automatically get drawn for the next year because there's so many deep, doe in there and stuff. So, and you can shoot pigs while you're in there. It's going to be awesome. So that's my update. I'm pretty psyched, even though it's not till November. I'm psyched to kind of get in there and just figure it out.
Yeah. I remember us, when you first moved to Texas, we're both kind of doing some research on where you should hunt and different places. And this place kept coming up and we're like, man, could you imagine like getting in there someday and like what that would look like? And, we tried to I know Corey tried to see if I could go and film for him. Doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No.
It may be in the future, but man, I did not think that it would be happening yet for you, and it's going to be pretty cool.
I'm bummed you can't come, but I did reach out to them, and the way it works is that you can apply with a buddy, and I didn't know that, but if you apply with a buddy, and you get drawn, there's a good chance your buddy's going to get drawn also. So I could have done it that way, and then possibly could have come in and filmed it. Because there's definitely been people that have filmed it. I found some YouTube videos and actually connected with a guy that shot a giant in there. Reached out to him just on Facebook, and he reached out back to me just a couple days ago, and we connected. He gave me a cell phone number, and he's like, "Hey, just give me a call and let me know when you want to talk about it." It's like, I'll give you some tips and where to scout and all that stuff. So I already got kind of a little bit of some notes I can start taking. So it'll be cool, man. It'll just be different, but it'll be awesome.
That is cool. I'm excited for you. Excited for you to get into a really cool place in Texas that probably a lot of people would want to hunt and not many people get to. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's it, man. Let's get into our podcast.
Let's get into it.
Who is the guy below us? Who's that guy right there?
Man, well, I think we need to start with the story of how we met him first before we introduce him. I know we've told it before, but it's a pretty cool story, and it's crazy to think that now he's coming on our podcast. We're friends with him. We've gotten to know him pretty well, and it's just a cool story. So it was last year before Corey was coming to the farm to hunt for the week, and a couple things are happening. One, Corey's bow got lost because he was shipping it to Pennsylvania, and it got lost. So that was the first part of it. The second part was at the farm, there's a creek, and then there's a spot that we have a couple sands down in the bottom, and I wanted to get access down through this campground so I could just drive up. And I had no idea where to start. And I don't know, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I sent a Facebook message and ended up getting his name. So I started talking to him and said, "Hey, I'm just looking to get access." And he talked to someone else and was able to do that for me, which was cool. He didn't even really know who I was. And then, we connected on Facebook. A couple hours later, Corey had posted something on our Rooted page about needing a bow. He reaches out to me, says that he works at a bow shop, talked to the owner, they could get us a bow. And it was just like the craziest, turn of events where I never thought I would even get to talk to somebody that would get me access. Now that same guy is helping get us a bow for Corey because he doesn't have a bow. It was just funny. And then over the past year, we've gotten to know each other. He came out with me actually last weekend and helped me hang some sets and pointed out all the poison ivy for me.
That's good.
Which is
a good friend.
So crucial.
It's a good friend.
But man, I'm excited to have Dylan on the podcast, and I'll read his bio in a second. But Dylan, welcome to the Rooted Outdoors podcast.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, for
man.
sure.
For sure.
So I got to ask, before I do your bio, I don't think I've ever said your last name, and I've heard someone else say it, and it wasn't how I was going to say it. So before I say it, I'm going to ask you directly from the source. How do you say
Matter?
Matter.
Ooh,
I thought it was
Matter.
It's spelled Matter, but no, it's funny. People in the area, some people call it Matter, some Matter, and they spell it the same. So it's a shot in the dark.
Yep, I knew it. I knew I was going to get it wrong. All right, so Matter it is. So let me just give some quick background information on Dylan, and then we'll kind of dive in. So Dylan, born and raised in Perry County. He went to Penn State for forestry, where he shot collegiate archery in the bow hunter division. He enjoys property management for better soil, deer, and income-producing timber. He's married and lives in Millertown. And I asked him before we started, I was like, well, tell me more about your archery, because I know you're a good shooter and you're not giving me something here.
Yep.
So he told me, I had to pull it out of him, but he said, and I don't even know what this means that much, but I'm sure a lot of people will. He shot an average 589 out of 600 over his college career and won nationals in his class his sophomore year. So obviously the guy knows how to shoot, and we're going to talk a lot of archery tonight, which I'm really excited about.
Yep. Yeah, man. Tell us about that. What does that really mean, man?
Yeah, what does that mean?
So basically, it means I killed a lot of paper. I hit the yellow a lot. So basically, I was up at college and we had an archery range that we could shoot for free. It was there and it was on campus and it was open pretty long hours. So it was coming up close to archery season. So October, it was like beginning of school year. And I was just down there shooting and the one kid was like, "Oh, wow, you're pretty good." And I was like, "I'm just practicing." I never shot competitively in my life, purely a brown hunter. I didn't like killing paper. It's not my thing. And then I was shooting again like a week later and the coach was there. He said, "You should try out." And I said, paper's not my thing. I didn't think I was good. I didn't know. Like, so I talked to him a little bit and he's like, "Yeah, do it." And I was like, okay. So I did it and I actually qualified in that division, bow hunter, which is the exact same bow that I took to the woods, except for I had a 70-pound bow then, and you have to shoot 60 pounds. But yeah, so either way, same bow. I ended up making the team, obviously, and just kept doing what I did, and it worked out.
Awesome.
So you have an X, which is the 10 or the 11 ring, depending on your division. For me, it was a 10. And then they break it down to tiebreakers if needed. But it's about the size of a dime. You shoot it at 20 yards or 20 meters technically. And if you hit it, you get 10 points. If you don't, you get 9, 8, 7, 6. So
it's pretty good is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Size of a dime at 20 yards.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to talk plenty of archery tonight. We have a bunch of topics that we want to go over, talk about all sorts of things related to equipment and shooting, and hopefully, Dylan is someone who has spent a lot of time shooting competitive archery, but he also hunts a lot too. So I think his perspective is pretty unique, where he's a really good shot, but he's also a really good hunter, and bringing those two together is important because there is a lot of things that are different for people who just shoot archery and don't hunt. So I think being able to bring those together is going to be a pretty unique perspective. And I think that, I'll certainly learn a lot tonight from him. So
for sure, man, I'm excited.
Yeah.
We haven't really ever dove deep into like the skill of shooting or like the equipment itself, and I think that's one thing that I was excited about too. And honestly, I'm going to learn a lot too tonight. So I hope I don't ask too many questions.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah. You just draw it back and let it go, right?
Yeah, it's just what you just got to practice. That's it, man. Right.
That's one of the big points for sure.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk? Let's just dive right in, and why don't we start with equipment? There's a lot of things there, but let's start with one of the biggest things, which is a bow. And so, what would you recommend, Dylan? Someone that's looking for either a new bow or someone that's just starting to shoot. What are some of the things that they should be looking for in a bow when they're trying to decide? Obviously, there's so much stuff out there. What should they be looking for?
First thing for sure would probably be comfort. If you're not comfortable shooting the bow, you're not going to shoot it well. That's definitely going to be probably, in my opinion, top priority. Natural feel. You don't want to force yourself to change the way that you shoot. But if you're coming in completely green, I would just say purely go off of comfort. Don't even look at the, name brands. And a lot of the name brands have, a different array of price ranges. So there's a budget-friendly bow from each brand. So if you're tied to one brand, that there's options. But comfort's number one for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. One thing you and I have talked about a lot recently is draw weight, and we'll get into some more hunting stuff in a little bit, but just touch on like when you're looking at your bow, just draw weight in general, what you should be looking for, and then also how to maximize the performance of the bow with draw weight.
Yeah. So again, comfort's going to be key. Late season, up in the northern climates, Pennsylvania gets pretty cold. So you're going to want to be able to pull that bow with all your clothes on. And you're sitting there cold for, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours without moving really. So you want to pull that bow back and be comfortable and get into your anchor. So again, comfort. So I I shot 70 pounds, like I talked about earlier. I didn't change the limbs on that bow, and I still shoot that exact bow for hunting, and it's a 60-pound bow, and I shoot 58 pounds. So
yeah,
you don't need a ton of weight to kill anything in North America, really.
Yeah.
There's things we'll get into later that help with lower poundage and ethical shots.
Yep. Yeah, I think people a lot of times get caught up in just shooting as high as they can pull back. Like they're barely pulling it back. They can't hold it back. And like you said, it's a lot easier when it's 90 degrees in the summer to pull a bow back than when it's 30 degrees and you haven't moved in 4 hours.
Yep.
You're going to feel it and you're going to struggle with that. And when you're, you know, looking at a buck that you've been chasing for a year and it's 20 yards away, there's a lot of things going into that. And the last thing you want to be thinking about is your bow. Like it should just be natural at that point. And
yeah, for sure. Another thing is you got to be able to put your bow down without your arrow flying, slapping the riser. That's a huge thing. Like this year when I shot my buck, he stood behind a hard maple tree for, I don't know, probably a solid 2 minutes. And I was drawn on him and I had to let down, and I had doe around me. So if I let down, I had made any noise, he would have been gone. So letting down comfortably without, you know, the jerkiness is definitely going to be important as well. So not even just the draw cycle, but the letdown cycle. I think a lot of people overlook the letdown. It happens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had that happen when I was younger, when again I didn't know a lot about it either, and like I had a buddy that was like, oh yeah, like shoot 75 pounds or whatever, like shoot the max of the bow, and you're just like, I didn't know, I was new, you know. And I remember drawing on a doe, and I don't know what happened, but it had a lot to do with the weight, I'm sure, and trying to let down, and the arrow came off the nock and like literally fell down, hit the ground, deer, you know, ran off, that kind of thing. So I could tell where that, I mean, I know where that would happen to me. So
for sure. So let's move on. Obviously the bow is a big thing. And then the second biggest thing is an arrow. You obviously need an arrow. So what type of things are you looking for with that? Obviously people talk about, like, the hot topics are speed, right? That's what people talk about all the time, the speed and the weight. You know, how much does it weigh? You know, what would you recommend people look for when they're trying to pick arrows? Because just like bows, there's just so many things and so many options you can choose from. Is there a way to kind of simplify that?
Yeah, I'm definitely a happy medium kind of guy when it comes to weight versus speed. Again, I'm shooting 58 pounds. My arrow weighs 432 grains, and it's shooting at 262 feet per second, which is super slow to some people.
Yeah.
They see that IBO rating of 330 or 340, whatever that is. One thing that people don't realize is that IBO is under perfect conditions. So it's 30 inches of draw length, 70 pounds, and that arrow only weighs 350 grains.
Right.
So obviously, that's going to be a super fast setup, not an ideal hunting setup.
Now, why are you saying, just curious, why you're saying that's not an ideal hunting setup?
Yeah, so if I throw a brick and I hit you with it, it's going to hurt a lot more than I throw a feather. Equivalent speed, it's all, you know, it's kinetic energy. Takes a lot more to stop a feather, you know, 200 feet per second, or a brick rather, than a feather. So it's just, but you don't want to try and throw a cinder block out of a lower poundage bow, or it's just not going to work too well. But I definitely like a heavier arrow. It quiets your bow down. You get a longer life out of your limbs, because whenever that string releases, it's pushing that heavier weighted arrow, and it's not putting as much stress on your bow. If you encounter anything heavy within the deer, you know, bone, it gives you, again, more kinetic energy to kind of punch through that. There's other factors that go into that. But yeah, and then another thing, a lot of people get caught up in the arrow straightness. So when I shot in college, I shot the exact same hunting arrows that I was shooting, because that's what I had, and college students didn't have any money, so I wasn't about to buy any, target specific arrows. So I used my hunting arrows, and they worked just fine. And they weren't the straightest arrows on paper, but that's what I shot. They were tuned well for my bow, and as long as you hit the X, it doesn't matter how big your arrow is.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But,
Yep. You have a
No,
question?
I was just going to say, while we're talking about arrows, I know we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but can you just touch on I mean, there's carbon, there's aluminum, there's those new, was a blood sport arrows or something like that. I can't think of the name of what I'm trying to think of, but go through maybe the different types of arrows and like why you would choose carbon over aluminum or whatever.
Yeah. So carbon is obviously well, not the newest technology anymore, but is probably the most forgiving. So if you do, you're sighting in, you miss your target, and you hit the ground, it's not going to bend. It's going to go back to, or it's not going to, it'll bend, but it won't stay there. It's going to go back to, where it should be, that tolerance. Where an aluminum arrow, it's probably going to tweak or something. So, and then the other arrow that I think you're talking about would probably be like the Full Metal Jacket, where it's like a carbon.
Sorry. That's what it is. Yeah, the Full Metal Jacket. So
that's an Easton arrow. Basically, they kind of pioneered that technology. So it's a carbon arrow on the inner, and then on the outer, it's an alloy or an aluminum. And so basically, the reason behind that was that kinetic energy. People wanted to get a heavier arrow, but they still wanted the benefits of carbon. So they put a real thin layer of aluminum, which weighs more in carbon, but it's not enough to memorize. So it gets you that weight, which a lot of people like. And then that arrow also happens to be a smaller diameter, which creates less friction as it goes through the target or anything like that. And then target arrows for paper punching, same kind of theory there, has less wind drift because it's a smaller surface area coming on a crosswind.
Right.
So it does well in the hunting industry too. For that reason, if you're out west and you have a 50-yard or 60-yard shot, it's nice to have an arrow that doesn't plane as much as a fatter arrow.
Right.
And it's heavy.
So so generally speaking, I know there's more to it than just asking this simple question, but so Dave and I are going to go on an elk hunt next year in Colorado. Like, would I be looking at a heavier arrow, more poundage, like that kind of thing? Or is it not that, how would you approach an elk hunt out in Colorado if you're going to go archery hunting out there?
I think for the way my health is right now, luckily, I would probably bump up to 70 pounds. I don't feel any need to go higher than that. And I would probably maybe go up to a 500 grain arrow. Okay. I don't think it'd be a huge deal. But I mean, there's people that shoot like 800 grain arrows. And a lot of the traditional guys, they shoot a heavy arrow because they're shooting such a light poundage, and also with the traditional bow, they're a lot louder than compound. So, but yeah, I mean, 70 pounds is probably going to be plenty. Again, there's people that do more. If you're comfortable with that, go for it.
Sure.
But I mean, there's also females that shoot. There's also females that shoot 35 pounds.
Yep.
And kill elk.
Yep. Sure.
There's videos of kids doing it.
Well, and dude, I mean, shot placement's everything.
Yeah, and there, like you said, there's other things that we'll touch on, but obviously, broadhead selection's a big thing.
Yeah.
More important for a bigger game like that.
We'll jump into broadheads is next. When you say you're kind of middle ground as far as weight, what would you consider middle ground? What would you consider pretty light arrow? Maybe let's just focus on whitetails. Like, what would kind of be like your light end, your middle ground, and your high end, just to kind of talk numbers so that when someone is actually going out and they can determine, okay, if I want to go lighter arrow, here's about where I'd be, and then just kind of work my way up.
Yeah. So another thing I should mention is obviously the longer your arrow, the more it's going to weigh. So I'm the taller guy, so I have a longer draw length. So my arrows are going to typically be heavier than someone else's, even if they're shooting a higher grain per inch arrow. So I think mine are 9.8 grains per inch.
Okay.
So I would say that's probably middle ground, 9.8.
Okay.
And then heavy would probably be anything over 10.5.
Okay.
For example, your Carbon Express pile drivers are a heavier arrow. I shoot the Mayhems from Carbon Express. The Maximas would probably be on your slightly lighter end. Again, anything under 400 is definitely a light setup
Okay.
for any animal. For deer, it's light. For elk, it probably shouldn't be used, honestly.
Yeah.
And then the 430 range is probably low middle, I would say, for whitetail. And then, you have people going up to around 600 pretty regularly.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. I tried to go heavier. I just can't get them to shoot well out of my bow. I always go back to the exact same arrows I shot in college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've tried.
Whatever works, right? Whatever works.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I spend a lot of money on these better arrows and they just don't fly right. I just can't get them tuned up. And then there's another thing that we should touch on real quick.
Sure.
Front of center, or FOC is what they call it, FOC.
I don't even know what that is. So
yeah, so front of center is where the balance point is in your arrow.
Okay.
So basically, the higher or the farther it is to the front of the arrow, the higher the FOC, the front of center.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep.
So described as, those footballs that had there's like a little football about the size of a baseball in the front that had wings in the back. They whistled.
Mm-hmm.
So you could throw those for a mile compared to a high school size or a college football. And they're really accurate and they spiral nice. So that's the idea behind these arrows. If you add more weight to the front of your arrow, it's going to, give you that small whistling football effect. I don't know how
I get it. It makes sense.
But yeah, I tried that, and I mean, those arrows were actually lighter than my current arrows, but they penetrated deeper because of that front of center. I'm sure it has something to do with physics, but I went to forestry, so we won't go there. But yeah, those are definitely if you can get that style to shoot well, it's definitely beneficial. It just takes a little bit of time and tuning because they're typically a smaller diameter arrow, and you have an outsert that goes over the arrow shaft.
Okay.
So, now, do all the big name companies make those type, or are those very specific companies?
Yeah, I would say Easton was probably the first to introduce that style, and then Victory, the VAPS. Victory Armor Piercing is what it stands for. Yep. They're there too. Carbon Express has like a .204 diameter arrow, and that's like middle, and then the .166 is the micro diameter arrows.
Okay.
But yeah, most of the major ones, I think Gold Tip has it. Easton definitely does. Victory, Black Eagle. I think they all pretty much have something that's smaller than a standard arrow.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else on arrows that people should be looking for when they're looking to make a change or looking to get set up? Or is that pretty much covered?
So probably the most important thing is the correct spine. Arrows need to flex, and they flex for a reason. So if we have an arrow that's too light of a spine, it's not going to tune. You can't get it to shoot what they call bullet holes in paper.
Right.
So typically everybody except for Carbon Express, the higher the number, the lighter the spine, and the lower the number, the stiffer the spine.
Okay.
So
now do you just have to get one that works for you or you have to tune your bow to match it, or what does that process look like?
Most pro shops will have a chart for whichever manufacturer you want to look at. All the manufacturers have it on the website as well. So you can go in there and say, okay, my draw length is 29 inches and my weight is 60, my draw weight. And then you run across in that chart, and then wherever the meet is what you should be shooting.
Okay. That makes sense.
So this is another weird thing. So, but it's a little bit of trial and error. So on Carbon Express's arrow chart, I'm right in the middle of the spines between 250 and 350. Now theirs are opposite. So the higher their number, the stiffer it is. So I should be probably a 250 spine in their arrows. And again, I shoot 350 because if we go back to college, I shot a 70-pound bow. I started. So that's what I had. And those arrows to this day are still shooting the best out of my setup, and they're technically over spine. But I found that if you're over spined, it's better than being under spined. You don't want to be under spined.
Okay. So when you say under spine, You mean like not stiff enough?
Yeah, correct. Not
Okay.
stiff enough.
Right. Okay.
It just won't tune.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of this, the overarching theme is, there's principles, but you kind of have to tweak things to get what works for you, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. They're going to do things a little bit different.
Yeah.
At least that's what it sounds like to me.
Do you find sometimes that guys, like they might have like the same setup, maybe they went to, and I'm not saying anything about like Cabela's or any of those stores, but like they go to Cabela's or something, they buy a bow off the hook, and the guy sets it up for them. They shoot it for like 3 years. They think the bow's shooting well, right? And then they maybe meet somebody like you, right, at a bow shop where that's what you're doing, like specifically, and then you actually tune the thing up, and they didn't even realize how good it could be. Do you find that happens?
I haven't found it happening a ton, okay. But it for sure, like to get to my level, your bow has to be tuned. There's no way around it.
Yeah,
if your bow's not shooting to its optimal performance, it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to shoot. So your equipment definitely has to be set up properly. It's not rocket science. I mean, there's some people that are better at it than others. An average tuner, I'd say. There's a guy that I know is a phenomenal tuner.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I was just curious to see like if, well, so you answered my question really. My question is like, there's the basic setup of a bow, and then there's like the fine tuning little things that you're talking about now that maybe somebody might not necessarily know. They could set up a bow that it'll shoot accurate enough that, you could
kill a deer,
you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But like when you get into like professional competitive shooting, there's probably little tweaks and things like that you're constantly making. Like I know, well, I don't know this, but I'm assuming like you might shoot maybe a different poundage when you're shooting competitive than you would if you're in the woods hunting. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the poundage isn't just it,
Obviously, eventually I ended up getting sponsored. That happens. So I ended up getting sponsored by Prime, which was awesome. And I did get a free target bow, a target specific bow from them. And I shoot like 42 pounds or something like that on that. So it's super light. Yeah. So, I mean, there's different bows for different things. But I would say if I practiced equally on both bows and they were both tuned, I could shoot equally as accurate. I know Dave, you'd asked me that a while ago, and I honestly think I could shoot them both, equally.
Okay.
Now that being said, the bow, I guess we'll just transition into bow science here.
Sure.
So target bows are typically longer axle to axle. So from your top cam to your bottom cam, that's your axle to axle. So that's typically longer. Same with your brace height, which is from your grip to where you basically knock your arrow, your string. That's your brace height. The longer that is, and the longer your axle to axle is, the more forgiving that bow is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be as twitchy in the hand. Typically, it tends to be a slower bow as well, but I'm not worried about speed when you're in archery, when you're target, trying to kill a target, basically.
Yeah.
So, but I look for the same aspects in a hunting bow as well. I mean, like I said, I'm not really a speed freak. I don't think speed kills. Shot placement is key. Indians did it with a stick. Their bows weren't fast. They weren't necessarily quiet either. I'm sure they shot a decently heavy arrow with basically a rock on the end of a solid stick. So their arrows were probably pretty heavy. But if they could do it with that equipment, I think we can do it with our equipment. We don't need to overthink the process. But my hunting bow right now is 7 1/4 inch brace height, and then 31 or 32 inches axle to axle.
Yeah.
I'd like to shoot a longer axle to axle bow, but it just gets too finicky in ground blinds and tree stands. So it's a happy medium for me. Now a lot of bows, the Matthews Triax, I think it is 28 inches axle to axle.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some shorter bows out there, but again, I'm a taller guy, so it just doesn't work. The string angle pinches the knock, and the arrow jumps up and down. It's bad news.
Yeah, no good.
But
that's good.
Shorter, it would work for them. We sell a lot of them. So.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. I've been looking at a new bow. Dylan's been helping me out, like kind of just answering all my questions. And, one of the things that we were looking at right away was, the height, and then the I guess brace height, right? That's and trying to find a good middle ground, because hunting is a little bit different. Like you said, you're in a blind, you're in a tree. You can't have this super long bow that you're banging around, and you're in a blind, and you can't draw because it's hitting the ceiling. Right? You can't have that. But at the same time, some of the smaller bows, for at least someone taller, you're going to also run into some issues there. It might not be as solid in your hand. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for. If you really want the accuracy, maybe get a longer bow. And if you want to just really focus on the hunting aspect, maybe something a little bit shorter. But it just depends, kind of have to figure out where your priorities are and what works for you. I mean, that's kind of the conversations that Dylan and I have had when I've been looking at a new bow. Where are my priorities? And I kind of, I want a good hunting bow. I want it to have a good size so that I'm not going to be banging into stuff, but I also want to be able to shoot it accurately. So kind of some middle ground for me. And that's been helpful to learn that, because I didn't really know about, all bow science before.
To help people understand the axle or brace height analogy, I use a tightrope walker. They always have that long pole that they walk with. So basically, it's harder to change the position of that pole the longer it is, because there's more weight farther away from you. So physics, it's harder to interrupt the pole. So that it keeps them balanced. Same thing with a bow. So if I have a longer axle bow, it's going to be harder for me to torque it left and right. And then brace height, it's going to be harder for me to torque my hand this way. Which torquing your bow hand is never good.
No.
So, that it just makes it easier. That's when I said more forgiving. You're going to torque your hand, your bow arm, your hand. It's going to happen. It just makes it more forgiving on that. Oops, made a bad shot. It's a little bit more forgiving.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. It's really good information when you're kind of out. I know when I bought my first bow, like I didn't look at any of this stuff. It was just like, oh yeah, that one looks good. Let's go with that. Can I shoot it? Can I hit somewhere in the middle? All right, figure it out. But now this time through, being able to like think through all the stuff and have someone that can kind of walk me through it is important. And for anybody out there that's looking for a new bow or looking to get a bow for the first time, you should be talking to somebody that has the knowledge that Dylan has to help walk you through that. I don't have that, but he does. And that's why I've been asking him. We talk about it all the time, and I went to the shop with him, shot a bunch of bows. We talked about different stuff, and landed in a place that I felt comfortable, but it wouldn't have been the same if I hadn't had his help. I would have been kind of just the same thing. Like, I guess this, okay. Like, I don't know anything about like how it works, but and that's not really a good way to maximize what you're trying to do in the field.
Yeah, and no one today is really making a bad bow.
Right.
They got to stay competitive, so they know they have to put a good product on the market. So they're good. Sure. They're good bows. It goes back to the very beginning. What we talked about is comfort. With what fits you, what can you repeat the same thing over and over again with? Like, which bow are you going to be most consistent with? That's the key to archery, is consistency.
Yep. Let's dive into one that everybody loves talking about, is their broadheads. They do. Everybody loves talking about it. They do.
So and the guys that really love to talk about their broadheads are the guys that never shoot any deer.
Yeah.
I found that to be somewhat true. But yeah, I don't understand the big craze about a broadhead. It does one thing. It basically makes a deer bleed. You can kill a deer with a field point. It's got to be. So what I look in a broadhead is it sharp? They're pretty much all sharp. And is it accurate? If I don't hit what I'm aiming for, that's, again, bad news, not good.
Right.
So those are the things I look at. With my kinetic energy and setup, I can pretty much shoot a large fixed blade, a smaller mechanical is what I feel comfortable with. But
have you shot any of the hybrids? Have you shot any of the? So I have. I'm trying to think if I shot a deer with it yet. I don't know. I'm. The Muzzy makes that. Gosh, and I can't even think of it. Yeah, so it's basically got two mechanicals and two fixed blades. So I've been shooting those. I think I shot a doe with it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was pretty brutal. I mean, it was. was, but that was the first time I've ever tried anything with mechanical. I've always been completely against it for all of the bad things you can hear. And I'm like you, like,
yeah,
I've always been a set Muzzy fixed blade, 100 grain, and it's always worked. And why change it if it's working? I just saw this one. I was like, maybe that's a way to kind of like sneak into the fixed, sneak into the mechanical world. But I was just curious if you've shot any of those.
I haven't personally. I've always shot fixed blades, and then the past year and a half ish, I shot some mechanicals because I was, let's face it, a little lazy. Didn't practice as much as I should have, but I'm super picky. If I can't hit a baseball at say 60 yards, 50 yards pretty consistently with that broadhead, I'm not going to do it. I know you can kill a deer with a 6-inch, 8-inch pie plate, but that's risky business.
You can kill a deer, right? But
that's risky.
Our job is to make sure that you kill the deer. That's our obligation, right? To that
animal. So I want to try and respect the animal as much as possible, obviously. So I want to be the best shot I can be with the best accuracy that I can achieve. So so I started off with the Montex simply because we're going back to when I was like 13 here.
Yeah.
So the Montex are a fixed blade, and it's a really shallow angle. So the blade steepness is really acute, if you will, I guess, or really narrow, or however you want to describe it. So it uses less force to basically penetrate the vitals. So I use that, and I recommend that to a lot of younger people or females, or even guys that are getting up there in age and don't want to shoot 50, even 60 pounds. We have a lot of guys that come in the shop say, "Hey, man, I have shoulder issues," and we get them hooked up with a 45-pound bow, and they're still able to shoot a compound. Or we go the other route and get them a crossbow, and they're still happy. So, so broadheads. Last year I jumped up to 100% mechanical, and it was the G5 Dead Meat, which is a smaller mechanical. So it's 3-blade, 1.5-inch cut. The failure thing I was always worried about with a lot of the mechanicals, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
So this broadhead here is pretty bomb-proof. I mean, even if it didn't deploy, you're still going to get close to probably 3/4 of an inch of a cut. So you're still going to get a little bit of bleeding. Yeah. But no issues with that broadhead. Backtracking. So I went from the the Montec G5 Striker, shot some weird ones in between there, all fixed blades, Q80 Exodus. I shot a Rage once, so we'll touch on that here. So I was shooting the same setup, the 58-pound, 332 grain arrow. The Rage Trypan is a 2-inch cut, I believe, is what it's advertised as. Very accurate broadhead. I was comfortable with the collar that they used on it. And I shot a doe. I think she was about 30 yards. And I was so used to watching my arrows just basically zip through.
Yeah.
Even at my lower poundage, the arrows just, boom, they were gone. And they would stick in the ground. So I shot this deer, behind the shoulder. Didn't hit any shoulder, which is perfect. Double lunged her. Did get a pass through, but I could see my arrow. When it hit, it slowed down significantly. And then it fell out the other side of the deer, the doe. It was just laying there. So obviously I knew I did lose some kinetic energy in that opening. But
it's interesting.
Found the deer, no problem. So obviously you don't need to get a pass through. You need to get, vitals is what we're aiming for. But pass through makes it nice, blood trail. 2 holes is better than 1. So
true.
It's like anything else, right? Like you could jump on a hunting forum right now and find like 50 guys that love them and 50 guys that hate them for whatever reason. It goes back to like figuring out what works for you. And you know how it is. I mean, you're in that world. Like some guys get a new bow every year. Like some guys switch their broadheads every year, and some guys shoot the same bow for 10 years and they're doing just fine. So it's really boils down to what everybody wants, what's good for them.
Touching on fixed versus mechanical again, your mechanicals are definitely going to shoot more like a field point. I mean, there's just less surface area for them playing. It's like a kite in the air, just a really small one that you're shooting with a fixed blade. It's got little wings and little blades, so it's obviously going to cause an air disturbance. So that's why your bow has to be tuned so your air is not coming at a weird angle through the air.
Yeah.
Whereas a mechanical lessens that possibility. It's still not an exact field point, but it's closer to that profile of a field point. So you're going to get more field point accuracy.
Gotcha.
Definitely not saying you can't achieve, field point accuracy out of a fixed blade. I've done it. Like I said, I've shot out 60 yards. I think I shot the strikers out to 80 yards. That's what I shot when I was in college. So I was shooting pretty well. The bow was tuned up, and yeah, I mean, I was hitting, a 4-inch group at 80 yards pretty consistently. So it definitely can be done. It's just how much you're going to practice and how well is your bow going to be tuned.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry. Did you want to?
Yeah, just real quick. We talked about this, and I just wanted to kind of point this out to people. Dylan, we talked, I think it was last year, you had said that you hadn't been practicing as much as normal, and I think you were limiting your shot range to 20 yards, 30 yards?
30 yards, actually, yeah.
Yeah,
yep,
so
30 yards.
And the reason I wanted to point that out was because this is someone that obviously shot competitively in college, has had a lot of success, but it had enough realization, enough awareness that he just hadn't been practicing enough. He probably could have shot 40, 50 yards, no problem, but he wasn't 100% confident in making those shots, and he just cut it off at 30 yards. And I have a lot of respect for that, and I think a lot of people should adopt a same mentality. Someone as good as him, really, most people in his situation probably wouldn't worry about it because they've shot so much their whole life. But he knew that he just wasn't comfortable and shouldn't take the shot. And I have a lot of respect for that. And I just wanted to point that out to other people out there that might be in a similar situation. That to me, that's the right move. It is
for sure.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine injuring a deer and not finding it. So I figured I would try to eliminate that risk, and it worked out. Now I've been shooting a lot more this year so far. Not nearly as much as I used to.
Sure.
Shooting is kind of like riding a bike.
Yeah.
Once you get it down, it still definitely helps to shoot. A couple times a week would definitely be beneficial.
It's one thing to lose a deer, but when it's something that you could have really prevented. I mean, it happens. Mistakes happen, and it's hunting. Dude, I respect the heck out of that, man.
Yeah.
Let's jump into shooting a little bit. So I have 2 questions for you, actually. One is, you hear a lot of, at least I hear a lot of, the way to get really good at shooting is to shoot distance. So like, get really accurate at 50 yards or 40 yards or whatever, because it gets easier than if you're at 20 yards. So that's the first question I had. So maybe touch on that. And then the other question I have is, with my situation over the years, I've never really had, when I was in PA, I was pretty close to a range, so I could go there pretty consistently. I was always kind of that person though, that like would pick up the bow 2 months before the season and just keep shooting. I wasn't that person that shot all year long. However, I started to shoot, like I'd put a block in my basement when we were in Pennsylvania. I couldn't easily go to the range every night, but I could, it might be 15 feet in my basement, but I'd set up a block and then I'd shoot into it every night. I'd shoot a couple arrows just to like keep muscle memory. And like, nobody ever told me to do that. I just kind of did it and got into the habit of doing that. And I think it really kind of helped me not think about things at all when I'm in the tree. And I think it helped. So I'd like to hear your comment on that. If that anything that you've ever done or something maybe I could have done differently, or would you just encourage that to somebody that doesn't have access to shooting in their backyard all the time or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. I shoot in my basement still. I have 6 acres. I can shoot outside, but it's nice to shoot inside sometimes if the weather's bad, or if it's, the morning of a hunt, I'm going out, I'll shoot in my basement, make sure my bow hasn't been tweaked. But yeah, definitely that's better than not shooting at all. Muscle memory is a big key. It's obviously going to be hard to sight your 30s, 40s, even your 20-yard pin while you're in your basement. But if you are able to make that, once a week trip, once a month trip, once every 2-week trip to shoot those longer distances, it's going to help. But you had talked about shooting longer distances to get better. I think you got to start at square one. You can't just say, all right, I want to get better. I think you got to look at the small things before you go shoot the longer distances, because you start shooting 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it can get frustrating if you're not shooting, a general rule of thumb is for every 10 yards, 20 yards, 30. So 10 yards, you should have an inch group. 20 yards, you should have a 2-inch group. That's a general rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. That's what people like. I don't like that. I don't want to shoot an 8-inch group at 80 yards. I want to shoot, the same group. But so a lot of people try to hold themselves to that standard, which can be hard if you're at 60 yards. A 6-inch group really isn't that big. So the reason I say it can be hard or impossible actually is if you're shooting a bow that's not decently tuned, you can Robin Hood, you can knock arrows together at 20 yards all day long. 30 yards gets a little bit bigger. You're probably just thinking, okay, well, it's a farther distance, that's acceptable. 40 yards, the gap gets bigger, 50, 60 gets bigger. So I would like to see people definitely focus on their bow fundamentals, make sure their bow is tuned before they try to shoot, past that 20, 30, 40 yards. So when I say their bow tuning, go to a pro shop, shoot it through paper. So what they have, most pro shops will have paper. It's basically freezer paper attached to something somehow that you shoot through. And it should look like, basically, if you have your fletchings on your vanes, it should have, should look like a bullet hole in the center with your 3 vanes. It should look like the back profile of your arrow. If it doesn't look like that, your nock's going whichever way, your bow's not tuned very well. It doesn't have to be a perfect bullet hole. I've never shot a perfect bullet hole ever. But my bow now is within a 1/4 inch, in the way that I grip my bow, that's what works best. And that's how it is. So if you don't have those steps down, I don't care how far or how much you practice at a distance, you might just frustrate yourself and then give the sport all up. It's not worth it. So make sure you're good at 20, 30, 40s. Make sure your bow's tuned. And if you're shooting at 40 yards and you're getting like 6, 8-inch groups or even just random fires, and you're shooting, a 1-inch group, or you're knocking arrows at 20 yards, odds are your bow's probably not tuned perfectly if you've been practicing at that 40 yard for a good while. If you shoot it one time and say, oh man, I suck at 40 yards, it's probably just a practice thing.
Right.
But if you've been practicing at 40 yards for, a month's time and you're not getting any better, it's probably a tuning issue. Hop over to your pro shop and see what's going on. Shoot it through paper. Another thing is you got to pay attention to your grip. That's my biggest thing. If I don't pick up a bow for, say a month at a time, I lose the muscle memory for my grip. Going back to what you said, Corey, in your basement, it doesn't matter how far you're shooting, 1,000 yards, 1 yard with the bow, you're holding it the same way. Yep. So in your basement, you're shooting that the same way you're going to shoot at a deer at 40 yards. Same exact process. So that process is probably the most important thing to shooting any distance. So once your bow's tuned, you're practicing, you got to practice the same every time.
Right.
So if you want to shoot with gloves on, you should probably shoot with gloves on closer to season. If you want to shoot with a hat on, you should probably shoot with a hat on. If you got a shorter draw length, that string angle is going to be steeper, where mine's longer. So my string actually doesn't touch my hat, but it happens with a lot of females. If they want to wear a hat while they hunt, the first time they draw it back, their hat gets, kicked to the side because of their string. Yeah. And it throws them off and it surprises them, and they're, it happens a lot with shorter draw length people, kids, and shorter people. But so, the fundamentals are key, just like everything really. You got to get the fundamentals. You can't run before you walk.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So, shooting in the basement, good stuff. I do it. It's always nice. You should always shoot your bow, especially during season. I've had it the one time that my bow was 22 inches off to the left.
Boy.
Perfectly good elevation. Just, I was shooting 22 inches to the left. So if I would have shot a deer and it was coming, from my left coming to my right, and I was shooting off my left-hand side, I would have gut shot that deer.
Yep.
Yeah.
and that's no bueno. So it pays to shoot your bow in your basement. I don't care if it's 5 yards. It's gonna show if it's that bad. It's gonna show up 5 yards. But muscle memory, the grip. Everybody's grip's different too, I should add. Mine is a high grip, so most of the bow pressure is on this part of my hand, up where my thumb and my finger meet.
Yeah.
Some people have a flatter grip or a lower grip, where they put more bottom wrist into the grip of the bow, and then they have more of their palm, that center line, coming down between the two meaty parts of your palm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all preference.
You think it's just about just consistency? Like once you get it how you like it, it just has to be repeated exactly the same?
Yeah. So whenever I was shooting in college, if I made a bad shot, my coach, if the higher meets or something like that, or somebody that was watching, my grandfather, he actually probably started it. I actually used to give him my phone, my smartphone, and he would film it. If I made a bad shot, say I shot an 8 or a 9 instead of a 10, I'd go back and look, and 9 times out of 10, it was my grip or my stance, or the way I was standing.
Interesting.
So it's amazing how much grip pressure it can do. So another thing, when you're shooting competitively, some divisions, some leagues, some different meets or whatever you want to call them, have different rules. So some of them you can't touch your sight, but man, I'm consistently hitting here or there. So I've gotten to the point where I can adjust my grip, my pressure in my hand on my bow grip, and I can force that arrow to do what I want to an extent. But not hunting related. Don't do it when you're hunting.
Right.
When you're hunting, it should be, it's not that important when you're hunting. I'm talking, half an inch or less.
Sure.
That's what we're talking here. So half an inch in a deer world, you're good.
Right.
Put it where it's going to be. Half an inch isn't going to do anything. So
that's true.
Can you touch on something that I think is a conversation? It seems like a lot, and actually Dave and I were just talking about it when Dave was here in Texas a couple weeks ago. We were talking about target panic, and I went through a phase where it was probably also a time in my life where I wasn't shooting a lot either, which was kind of my fault. But I would go through, so I would release, and I would actually look around around the string at where the arrow was going to go. And of course, then you're pushing everything to the left. And I went through that, and it was horrible. Like I went through this time where, it just like I had such a panic attack when a deer would come out, because I was afraid that I was going to wound this deer and stuff. And it lasted for like a good season. And I'd get out of the tree, I'd go home the next day, and I'd shoot, and everything would be fine. And then I'd get in the tree and I'd shoot, miss a deer, whatever. Like it just was terrible. So just kind of touch maybe on I don't even know if that is target panic or what that is, but that's kind of what I went through.
Yeah. So target panic, pretty much same thing, I would say. It's probably just maybe a slightly different form. So target panic to me is forcing your pin to stay exactly where you want it to be. It's impossible. You can't do it. Pin float. I mean, no one's perfect. Obviously, the more you practice, the more you get those muscles tuned up to bow form, we'll call it, or bow shape. The less float you're going to have. Obviously, the more tired or fatigued I become, the more my pin floats. So forcing that pin to stay there. So when you're releasing, a lot of people have the wrist strap, and your pointer finger is your trigger finger, basically. Yep. So I don't like using the trigger finger. The analogy for archery, it shouldn't be a trigger. It should almost be a surprise when your bow goes off, which is very hard to do with those types of releases. So basically, target panic in the most common form is trying to hold that pin where it needs to be, which is impossible, like I said. And right at the last second, your eyes tell your brain, hey, that pin is not where it needs to be, and you flinch. That's target panic.
Okay.
You're like, oh. Or you forcefully try to push that pin back to the X or the kill spot or the heart or whatever you want to call it. And then bad things happen. So I would say any person that shoots archery for an extended period of time, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or shoots a lot in a shorter period of time is going to experience some form or severity of target panic in one form or way or the other. A lot of people, especially at longer distances, they like to see their arrows fly, so they'll shoot and they'll peek around like Corey said, so that's target panic basically. So in the target world, they use a hinge style or a surprise release basically. So there is no trigger. It's a pressure, so you're pushing with your bow arm and you're pulling your shoulder blades together with your release hand, and it's a surprise. So releases have a huge influence on how well you can shoot a bow, I think. So a lot of people, when they're just getting started, especially for kids, they'll get the cheapest release, which is okay. You can shoot decent with a good or a cheaper release. Not all cheap dollar value releases are a cheap release. Like the release I shoot is a $60 release. Mm-hmm. And there's $100, $200 releases out there, but I shoot a $60 release. So the key is you don't want that trigger to be super heavy. It's just like shooting a gun. If it's really heavy, you're pulling and pulling and you're straining, and it's harder to get that surprise effect if you have a hard trigger pull on that release. Another style is a thummy. So the release is the thumb.
Yep.
So your thumb is a little bit more finesse than your pointer finger. You have a little bit more control. There's a little bit more muscle in your thumb. So that's another reason why people use those.
Yeah.
But for hunting, I still use a wrist sling. Target, I do use a hinged release, or some people call them a back tension, but they're technically two different things. But I would say that the sensitivity of that trigger and the adjustability of the position of where that trigger is in relation to your finger is probably, it has a bigger impact than a lot of people realize.
Is there things that someone can do if they're going through a form of target panic to kind of work their way out of that? Because I know it can last a long time for people. I know a friend of ours is going through it now. Like what can they do to try to get out of that habit?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest thing I've found that people do, and I myself do it, even if I don't have target panic, it's called blank bailing. So basically you walk up 5 feet from your target, super close to your target, and you actually shut your eyes, pull your bow back, or you pull your bow back, make sure you're in the general facility, I guess,
sure.
And then shoot. So you're not shooting balls or whatever. But this is a good practice to do in your basement. I still do it sometimes. We did it, I would say, a couple times a week in archery practice when I was in college. I mean, we practiced every day. And we did it a couple times, some kids more than others, but the coach required us to do it, probably a couple times a week. So basically you're up there, and the only thing you're focusing on, you're not looking at that pin at all. Your eyes are shut. So you're focusing on your grip, how your hand is holding the bow, and your release. That's it.
Yep.
You're not looking at the sight. You're not looking at anything else. You're blank bailing. Our coach, we had music playing. He would always turn it off when we blank bailed. So zero distractions. Yeah. Just you and your bow. That's all you're doing. And that helps. So it just kind of helps trigger that muscle memory to do, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I'm supposed to do over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So when you do open your eyes, you have that muscle memory that you're not really controlling because it's just kind of happening. So you're just like, so I'm supposed to release the arrow like this. And it's a more subtle release, not a punch or I'm off the target. I force my pin on. So that's honestly the biggest thing I could recommend, and probably the only thing really for target panic, other than, caution. So whatever, we won't say that word.
Yeah.
Thinking about it whenever when you're shooting. So, there's sometimes I'm just like, why am I trying to force the pin there? And I can just tell my mind, be like, all right, stop it. You need to shoot normally.
Yeah.
And like I said, practice is key, and good practice is even better than, because just like anything, if you practice crappily, you're going to shoot crappily. I mean, you got to practice like you want to win.
Right. It's good.
It's simple.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. I don't have much else. I mean, I feel like I've learned more about archery tonight than I have my whole life. So
oh, God.
Take it.
Yeah.
Take it.
Yeah. just, I mean, the biggest things that I could say to anyone, if I had 1 minute to sum it up is, make sure you practice like you want to win, and make sure your bow's tuned, and be comfortable and repeat. That's all you got to do is repeat those things, make sure it's practice is key. Once your bow's tuned, you can't blame the bow anymore.
Right.
And that's another thing I should touch on is we can't outshoot the bow. The bow is basically a machine. We have to become as close to a machine as possible. We're obviously human. So that's all there is to it. It's practice, and it takes practice to be good.
Yeah. Makes
sense. It's not going to happen overnight.
Man, you're a wealth of knowledge, man. I really appreciate you sharing so much. I mean, I feel like we could continue talking, and I know it's cool to be able to have somebody that I can ask those specific questions to. Also, and while I'm not currently looking for a bow, like I can't wait to get up there this fall and like get into the bow shop and shoot some different bows, because I probably will be looking next year to get another one. And Dave said it's been an awesome process, working with you, and you've been a big help to him. Also, very cool. And Dave and I were talking about this today. It's very cool to know who's hunting the neighbor property. I mean, it's really cool. And I know you guys are getting close, talking about putting a food plot in together and all this cool stuff. I'm a little bit jealous, but no, that's awesome, man. It's really cool to have you so close to where we're at,
Yeah. You know where we're at, Pennsylvania. So
that's it.
Oh, I'll be there.
That's all I got to say.
We'll be there, and there'll be some real quick hunts too, because I'm there for business a lot. So October, I'll be there. Yeah, dude, I'll be in there, and I'll be doing some business, but then there'll be probably some evening hunts at the farm, I'm sure.
There'll be some real business after the business.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Real business.
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you getting to really get to know you this fall,
Yep. We got to shoot together sometime.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, listen, man, thank you again for coming on and chatting with us, and I know you love talking about hunting and archery, and but we appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with some of the people listening. I know I took a lot from it, and I'm sure plenty of people who are listening will also be able to take some things from it, whether they're looking for a new bow or not. I'm sure that there's things that they can learn to improve. So thank you again, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure.
For sure, man. Well, take care, everyone. We're getting into starting to talk more whitetails and trail camera photos coming in. And it's exciting, man.
It is.
It's that time of the year.
Ready.
It's that time of the year.
Yep.
Did you get your set song yet, Dylan?
I moved one. I'm banking on just shooting a deer out of that stand, honestly.
Love it.
I like that. Confidence.
So much vacation this year, weddings. It's a busy October. I'm actually missing the first day of archery season since I started hunting, but no big deal. There's plenty more days.
Dave will save a couple for you. Don't worry.
I don't even hunt out there in archery season.
That's true.
It's a campground. So I will maybe in November, but I'm hoping to not need to go out. But the freezer's pretty full still, we'll say. So we should be good.
Good, man. Good for you. Well, cool, man. Well, we'll be talking to you soon. And for everyone out there, please check our YouTube page out. That's where this podcast will be. Also on all the other podcasts, iTunes, all that good stuff. But subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where we're going to put where we have put most of our videos and our upcoming stuff. Facebook, and then also Instagram. And Dylan, where can they get a hold of you, man? I don't know if you want to talk, maybe talk about the archery shop, where they can come see you if they're in that area, if they're in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I'm not at the archery shop as much as I used to be, but Baker's Archery Supply over in Halifax, Pennsylvania. There's a ton of knowledgeable guys. There's always knowledgeable people in there, whether they work there or not. We got a lot of good guys in there. Somebody will help them out for sure. If you want to contact me directly, I'm on Facebook pretty regularly. So just Dylan, Dylan, Matter, spelt matter. I should be on there somewhere. You should be able to tell if it's me from the pictures. So
yeah, you'll find them. Yep. Well, thanks, man.
And I'm always on there, so don't hesitate to shoot me a message on there, and we'll see what we can do.
Appreciate that, man. It's always good to have good resources, and hopefully somebody will reach out, man, if they have a question and you can help them out.
Great.
Yep.
Dave, anything else, buddy?
That's all I got.
Wrap us up. Take us home.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening, for tuning in this week. Hopefully you got some good information, and we have some pretty exciting guests lined up for future podcasts. So be sure to stay tuned with what we're doing, and we'll talk to you in the next one.
Awesome. See ya.
Therefore, as you received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. Colossians 2:6 and 7.